Thank you. Pleasure to be here with everyone today. Great, thoughtful comments, Wayne. I appreciate that. And thanks for the great introduction, Jamie, for setting the scene for this fuel cycle panel. Each person here will have absolutely excellent perspective, longevity in the industry, and paint the landscape here for this audience today and for New Mexico's future. And thank you again to Janet and the Clean team for hosting the event and all the support that goes into building a venue and audience like this. So again, let's take the next step here in the journey and talk about a project which we're proposing at my company. I'm Chris Frankland and work for General Atomics, and we are the leading parent company of Grants Energy, one of the sponsors here this week at Nuclear New Mexico. So what we've learned, what I'm listening to and taking away is uranium is critical in many ways. That term itself, uranium was designated a critical mineral last year, added to the list across multiple agencies in the U.S. government. So there's a national imperative for uranium production. Scott Lopez, wise words, touched on multiple attributes of uranium, how it can serve New Mexico and serve the country. The global market fundamentals are also strong. Otherwise, I don't think we would be seeing the resurgence we're seeing. I know Mahesh later in the panel will touch on a lot of the supply and demand and why those factors are coming together to create this particular moment. Those are important to understand. And I also think we are learning to acknowledge that the legacy that exists here in New Mexico, not only needs to be acknowledged, we need to take positive action, but not be paralyzed. Good word, Wayne. Yeah, very, very, very well said. So let's take this forward. I wanted to walk through some slides about our project, aptly named Grants Precision ISR project, so an in situ recovery operation near Grants, New Mexico. But first, I'm going to step back a second and give you a little bit more information on General Atomics itself and our participation in the uranium industry. So we have 3 affiliated companies which are active in the space right now. Rio Grande Resources is performing cleanup activities at the Panna Maria, South Texas site. We are looking for, and what we heard from commenters earlier today, were the success stories, right? Panna Maria will be one of those success stories, one where extraction was completed over many years and the earth and land is being returned to the hilly, grassy South Texas fields that were there prior, a lake that you can fish in, cattle grazing. So a really good story that we're completing that commitment, full life cycle that a company needs to do and meet its obligations. And as well, RGR is overseeing the closure of the Mount Taylor conventional mine footprint, also located near Grants. The Heathgate Resources affiliate of General Atomics is an active ISR uranium mining company. Last year, we celebrated 25 years of continuous operation in South Australia. So we have a team of about 350 people headquartered in Adelaide and a fly-in, fly-out mining operation in the outback. So middle to northern and South Australia is where we're operating. We'll go into a little bit more detail about how our experience in South Australia will inform and guide our efforts for our next generation project. Grants Energy is the one I'm obviously referring to, and we'll go into a little bit more detail, but the 3 aspects of and pillars of GA's activity in the uranium industry here. If we could transport you to South Australia, we would. It maybe not as sunny as it is here today. We've had some rain recently, but this is what our ISR well fields look like. This is our 4-mile area where we're actively mining today. For what you're looking at a series of pipelines with injectors and extraction wells going into the earth and creating churn underground to be able to release and bring back up those uranium molecules for further processing. So well fields like this would have a larger pipeline attached to our central processing plant called Beverly, and that is where under one roof we would take chemical stages to transform and precipitate and dry the product, put it into steel drums and into ISO containers, and those are ready to leave our site for export from Australia. Important to note here, we were the first ISR uranium operation in Australia. So our owner at General Atomics, we are a private company, had the long-term vision that he saw an opportunity that despite there not being a regulatory framework or a pathway for ISR mining in Australia, that we would be able to, through scientific demonstration, through learnings alongside our regulators, to demonstrate that the science is there, that we can prove that we can extract uranium from the ground in a safe and compliant manner. And that story is told by our 26-year life and many more good years ahead of us, as well as those following in our footsteps. So there will be more ISR, and there is one today with more to follow in Australia today. So turning to the grants project specifically, we're located about close to 2 hours from here. Many of you made the drive directly from grants, if that's about right. And we appreciate you having attended here today. So commencing with a stakeholder outreach program in late 2024, we started informing the public that this long-held uranium deposit, and by long-held, I mean General Atomics purchased it in early 1990s. It remained idle and inactive while market conditions were not supportive, and obviously those conditions have now changed. So we began the stakeholder engagement process, meeting with community members, leadership, and political leaders to inform that we have studied the deposit, the geology, using some of our experience in Australia and knowledge of how to operate an ISR mine, and determined that instead of it operating as a conventional facility, the better outcome would be to operate as in situ recovery. So very similar to the past slide, what we expect at Grants is a series of wells drilled from the surface, extracting the uranium underground, and being pumped to a central processing facility for further completion and export from that site. So why now and why GA? We're going to go point by point here. So again, I've been reflecting, the market signals are there, right? And I know Mahesh will go deeper into those signals themselves, but electricity demand, we haven't seen it in a generation with double-digit growth figures like this. So while the AI data centers are certainly a large driver, and the near term, while nuclear can go through its licensing and processing, will largely be met by gas generation. Over the long term, we expect nuclear to have a solid growth profile, not only in the US, but globally. So the chart on the right here is one that you'll see in many forms over the next couple of days. But what it's saying is uranium production sources that are operating today will eventually deplete in the 2030s and forward. We're going to need new sources of supply to come in to not only maintain a flatline production rate, but to accommodate future growth. The other demand signal that we've been watching is, it was only 5 to 7 years ago when many of the nuclear power plants in the US were ceasing production, retiring early or before their licenses were over, and we've seen a complete turnaround on that. So nuclear power plants are initially granted a 40-year operating license. We've had several sites that have extended those operations and licensed extensions out to 20 additional years. We're now in a situation where a second extension is prudent and assumed for almost all operating U.S. nuclear power plants to 80 years life. So a testament to Karen, our panelist, down the line there from Entergy, who operates a fleet of nuclear power plants. That's maintenance, that's investment, that's confidence, that's regulatory competence. All of those things have come together to build confidence that the U.S. fleet of nuclear reactors will have a long life ahead of them. Uh-oh, Jamie, talking to me. So some of the other factors here, and I'll scroll through these so I can talk to them more broadly. And Scott Lopez talked a little bit about the risk involved of imports, and that is important. So when times were bad and the uranium prices were low, and you had the rise of several other uranium-producing countries, the U.S. domestic uranium industry almost went to nil. Wayne referred to it as well. We were producing drops of uranium rather than the pounds we know this industry can, and the reflection of looking at a next generation of uranium properties with New Mexico at the center of that is meant to strengthen and re-energize that domestic supply chain that we know is very possible. Our project alone, once it's up and operational in the early 2030s, is planned to meet about 15% of U.S. domestic demand for uranium. So that 47 million pound number that John Endall started our conference with, this project and with a forward-facing look can really be a strong contributor. So how are we going to do that? We're going to apply a bit of innovation to our in situ recovery process. So on the left-hand side of this slide is a schematic of your traditional means of in situ recovery with a series of vertical wells from the surface. And those go down and do their work underground. We are going to employ a horizontal in situ recovery process where we have horizontal wells, very common to New Mexicans in the oil and gas industry, where horizontal drilling is quite commonplace, coming in at an angle and creating that churn between in the uranium-bearing aquifer to bring the uranium to surface. What that also does is it reduces surface disturbance by about 95%. So we think there's economic backing, the innovation brings that piece as well as an environmental attributes. Also, when I heard earlier I want to hear success stories of the industry, I thought of my slide here that hopefully that can act in that capacity. These are pictures from our Heathgate operations in South Australia. One of the strong attributes of ISR is that you don't have to wait till the end of the mine life to begin rehabilitating the land. So as one wellfield area is depleted and you're moving on to the next, the depleted well fields can undergo the rehabilitation, which we call progressive rehabilitation. So it's really a visual period of excellence, right, where you're able to show someone where you've got all this industrial activity, but it was only for a certain period of time, and once we're done, you're able to clip off the wells, put them in good status, in compliance with what you need, and then revegetate and have the land grow back to exactly the way it was before you started mining. So these are two examples, and this is ongoing. We're leading, as we should, since we were the first ISR uranium mine in Australia. We're leading this process for the government, and while they hold bonds, while we are performing our active production, once we meet milestones related to the rehabilitation, those bonds are returned to us. And we were the first one in Australia to have that back and complete that process successfully. So again, we're not only demonstrating to our regulators competence, but bringing the how we do business to this community in New Mexico of how we intend to operate here at Grants ISR. The numbers are big, right? Large impact project, large long life. When you're planning a 30-year project, the jobs and money that can come in from tax revenue is also large. Charles Lundstrom, our community manager at our Grants New Mexico office, often tells me, a lot of people come into our office to learn more about ISR, learn more about our project, but also to drop off resumes, right? That's really encouraging that people want to work back in the industry and sector, and we can be a local and state and national impact for this project we want to take forward. So this is the office I'm speaking about. So if you've seen this or drive on Route 66 through Grants, we're right off Route 66. So we've got our Grant Energy sign, and Charles and team will be there and staff that office for walk-ins or pre-planned meetings. So please reach out. The other thing we're doing with Grants community members is showing them. It's easy to talk about uranium ISR, but seeing it with your own eyes tells a different type of story in a sensory way. So we've taken a delegation, and I know Janet referred to it earlier, to Crow Butte to be able to see that operation and how its benign impact on the landscape, really thoughtful design in low impact visual, as well as meeting the environmental standards of excellence. So wrapping up here and passing it down the line in our fuel cycle conversation, I wanted to talk a little bit about how our product gets to market. And Jamie rightly showed how there's some packaging and yellow cake exists in drums. This map shows where our product leaves Australia and goes to one of three or all three destinations called the conversion facilities, where the U3O8 is transformed into UF6. So while we're currently not transiting the Suez Canal for obvious reasons, we're going around the African Cape to reach France, we do send material to the Urenco facility in Malvézy, France, the Blind River Cameco facility in Ontario, and Jamie mentioned the Metropolis, Illinois facility, the only conversion in the US, as we learned was shut down for 4 years due to poor market conditions and has recently restarted. And also of mention, our company General Atomics is a part of the conversion joint venture Converdyne with Solstice Advanced Materials. Solstice is a recent spinoff of Honeywell, if those terms can, to clarify the new business there. So we're participating in the uranium space, in the conversion space. We also have some nuclear fuel joint ventures with EDF in Europe related to our trigger reactors and the fuel that goes into those, the trigger research reactors. So GA has a solid nuclear footprint and certainly will bring its incumbent status and experience to the grants project. So thank you.
All right, good afternoon. My name is Paul Lorskulsint. I'm the Chief Nuclear Officer at Urenco USA. But before I really get started discussing about uranium enrichment, it would help me because I don't know the makeup of this audience if I asked a few questions. First off, I know all of you are interested in nuclear, otherwise you wouldn't be here. But by a show of hands, could you raise your hand if you're directly employed by like a nuclear facility? Okay, so I see about 10 hands. Okay, so maybe here's the second question. Those who are maybe looking at putting nuclear facilities in the area in which you live, if you're responsible for approval or responsible for general interest, could you raise your hands? Okay, another 10 or so. How about workforce development? Okay, so could you just shout out basically what other areas I'm missing? Because government, okay, yeah. So maybe interested in approving or looking at those other facilities. What others? Policy, okay. Anything else? Mining exploration. Okay, so all right. So I will try and tailor my discussions for you. But I will talk on a little bit of the technology that is involved with Urenco USA and how we've built it in New Mexico. So first off, quick question, right? We've mentioned it quite a number of times, but the uranium that comes out of the ground, how much of it, what percentage of it is uranium-235? 0.711. Okay, so in case it's hard for you to remember, here's a running joke that we sometimes have at Urenco. The uranium that's coming out of the ground fostered or generated the name for a convenience store. You know it as 7-Eleven, right? So that's how it's easy to remember for you who aren't well-versed in the nuclear industry. A little bit more that I also like to talk about, just to establish certain things. We also talked about it earlier, but I want to make sure that it sticks. The country that has the largest commercial nuclear power output is what country? Okay, I heard France. I heard the United States. Okay, any others? China? Any others? India? Okay, so I'll touch on each of those in turn. First off, France. France is actually a very common one that people say. It is because it is the largest by percentage. It is approximately 70% powered by nuclear facilities. China is also very common to be heard because it should be the largest by 2035. Today it is second. The United States is in fact the largest with 96 reactors, which I'll talk about here and show you in a moment. And the reason why I talk about that, it is very, very important fact to understand that from the perspective of why nuclear in the United States, why nuclear in New Mexico, why is it so important. Okay, so thank you. So now you'll see here the global nuclear power fleet, which is what I've just talked about very briefly. The United States is the largest, followed by China. And then very closely but behind China is France. So those are the three largest countries in terms of nuclear output today, okay? So remember that because the next slide I'm going to show you is going to look really weird. So, sorry, it's coming. But this is the enrichment process itself. This is what we do at Urenco USA. So we take what comes out of the conversion facility, which is that white powder that you saw in a previous slide about half an hour ago, and which is UF6. And we put it in centrifuges, which you also saw a picture of. I'm not going to show you the pictures of our centrifuges. Ours are way cooler. But if you want to see, please come for a tour at our facility in southeast New Mexico. So the key aspect for us is we put it through centrifuges, and we literally just spin it really hard. I hate to make it sound like it's that easy, but it is that easy. We just spin it really hard. And then so when we spin it, we move the uranium-235 atoms and we concentrate those, and that out comes the product, which is typically enriched, as mentioned before, between 3 and 5%. Typically, we're talking 4 to 5%. And then there's a depleted stream, which is about 0.2% of uranium-235. And then the UF6 from the product gets shipped to fabricators, 3 here in the United States, among other facilities in the world. The global enrichment market is very, very strange in terms of where the supply is and where the demand is. I've given you here a picture of what the market looks like. You notice in the United States, there's a lot of demand, not too much supply, because we are the only facility in the United States, in North America, that is currently producing. We produce about 1/3 of the total demand for the United States, but as you can see across the globe, there's a lot of different, sometimes the supply far exceeds the demand, as you can see in certain countries in Europe. China is about level, and they've always been that way because they only want to supply for their domestic market, but then you can see with that the rest of the world. So again, now focusing on the US facility and talking about our technology. I talked about it from a centrifuge perspective and how we've been doing that. We've been doing that across the globe since 1971. In 2010, we put our facility in operation here in the United States. For those of you who don't know, it's located in Eunice, New Mexico, which is about 30 minutes south of Hobbs. And we've been in operation since 2010. In fact, I was the shift manager when we first went online. So that was cool. The current aspect of it that is important for us to note and to bring forward about our facility itself is that we continue in operation and that we are talking and thinking about expanding. We've already announced an expansion, which I'll talk here very briefly about, of approximately 15%, of which we've completed half of that. We also are considering expanding even further. We want to capture at least half of the U.S. market that you saw previously here going in the next 5 to 10 years. The other thing which Jamie did talk about earlier is about LEU plus and HALEU. So LEU plus and HALEU terminology is a little bit strange for those of you who don't know the nuclear industry very well. So let me just talk briefly about it for a moment. LEU plus, remember, uranium-235 is what we care about. And we at Urenco USA only enrich it for commercial nuclear power plants. No military uses whatsoever, only commercial nuclear power plants. LEU plus is between 5 to 10% enriched in uranium-235. HALEU is between 10 and 20%. So the government definition, I don't want to confuse it, but in case you ever discuss it with the government, HALEU by the DOE definition goes from 5% to 20%, but that isn't useful for our industry, so we've divided it into that. Urenco USA is able to produce, as of December of last year, LEU plus up to 10%. That is a bridge fuel for these advanced reactors that we were talking about, these SMRs, that we can supply today. Urenco USA can supply today. The only reason why we're waiting is right now the fabricators aren't quite ready to receive it yet. So that's what's the holdup in making the next step for that aspect. And for high-assay, low-enriched uranium, we have potential plans to build a facility here in New Mexico in the next 10 years, but right now we are focusing on developing and building a facility in our UK facility as of this moment. So here are the 4 facilities that we have in our entire fleet. 3 are in Europe, and then there's our beautiful facility at the very bottom left in Eunice, New Mexico, which is about 4.3 million separative work units per year. Again, around 30% of the entire demand for the U.S. nuclear supply. Now, this is the part which is cool if you're interested in thinking about building a nuclear facility in your area. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about the investment that we put and spend the last few slides that I have talking about the value for the communities that we've provided. I mentioned the fact that we've already been in operations since 2010. Our capital investment that we've put into Urenco USA to this point is over $5 billion, and that's not, time adjusted for money. That was at the time we invested, so if you wanted to time adjust it, it'd be even more. Right now, we employ about 350 full-time employees and about 150 full-time contractors, 500 total site workers at peak. During construction, we're talking between 1,300 and 1,500. But normal operating is about 500 site workers. The Oxford Economics did a study on the USA socioeconomic impact of the facility, and this is kind of similar to what Dave presented earlier about ISR, except this is today's numbers. So the key impact, and there's a lot of facts up there, but the key items that I want to share with you is that generally speaking, one specific job at Urenco USA, according to this study, ends up resulting in 2 other jobs either in the local community or somewhere else in the United States. So 1 creates technically 3 jobs in the United States overall. And then the other item, which is really important to call out, is this amount of giving back that we've done here at Urenco USA. So the specific donations that we gave in 2024 was about $800,000, greater than $800,000, and that's not cumulative. That's for that year. Okay, so that is the amount of impact that we've had directly into the local community, and that wasn't a one-off. Normally, we increase it a little bit every year. So The only reason why I wanted to share that is just to really understand that we have an enrichment facility, a nuclear facility here in New Mexico, and how much impact it has had on the economies of not only the United States, but specifically New Mexico, and how that's being driven today by the market and the demands for what the world, not just the United States, but the world requires from the nuclear industry. And that's all I have. I'll answer a few questions later on. Thanks.
Thanks.